Thanks for joining us again. If you just stepped into the room, this panel is building off of our keynote on gender dynamics in health and safety. And because I won't be able to do them justice, I'm going to ask our panelists to briefly please introduce yourselves and your companies. Kaitlyn, we'll start with you. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kaitlyn Paiement. I'm the Director of People and Culture for Wyloo. I've been with the company for 15 years in roles that have focused in community engagement, education, training, and HR. Wyloo is a global company focused on developing nickel projects to decarbonize our future. We own the best claims in the Ring of Fire with our flagship Eagle's Nest project, having nickel, copper, and PGEs. We are currently working on updating our feasibility study, and we operate a remote fly-in, fly-out site in the Ring of Fire.
Great. Thank you. My name is Ben Graham. I work for Major Drilling. So I'm our Vice President of HR and Safety. I've been with the company now 18 years. We are operating on many of the sites around the world for mines where we are doing core drilling, underground, surface, RC work. So basically helping to extract and to identify the minerals that so many of the mining industry are using to make decisions on planning and things like that. So really love our company. I feel like we're trying to do the right things, although as we learned from Nancy's presentation, there's a lot of work ahead. So excited to be a part of that.
Hey, good morning. My name is Renee Price. I work for Vale Base Metals. We're an energy transition company mining copper, cobalt, and nickel, both here in North America, South America, and in Indonesia. My background is I'm a mining engineer. I've worked in production and operations across North America for the last 20 years. In the last about 5 years, I've been in the health and safety space, helped setting up, I'll call it operation-based management systems for corporations. And so looking forward to being here today for this discussion.
You love me,
Oh, good morning, everybody. My name is Steve Wrixon. I'm the Vice President of Health, Safety, and Environment for Cementation Americas. We are an underground mine contracting company specializing in shaft sinking, underground development, and design builds for clients around the world. And I've been with Cementation for 18 years and look after the health and safety within for the Americas. And also, I think it'll be applicable today, oversee the training and recruitment side of things for the Canadian operations, which ties into a lot of what we're talking about today, too.
Great, thank you. And I'm Sonia Gupta, the moderator of this panel, Director of Sustainability for Dundee Precious Metals, and Women in Mining Canada board member. So panel question to all of you guys, and we'd love to hear all of you answer. We just heard Nancy very profoundly walk us through the why, the research, everything that's out there, the risks in this space. In the context of your companies, could you please, each of you, briefly describe where each of your companies are on this journey of integrating gender into health and safety?
Sure. So I think when we look at the two things separately, both gender and then safety, we're really far along in our journey. Safety is one of our 10 values. It's at the forefront of everything we do and all the decisions we make across the business. And then when you look at gender, we've made it a huge global priority. We have 4 key goals across all of our global sites. And those are focused on gender equity in the workplace, equal pay, and then advancing careers for women across STEM roles and other roles. But when you take that gender lens and you apply it to where we are in our health and safety journey right now, I'd say we're early in how we're actively integrating it. We've really been focused on the psychosocial safety aspect of it. And then as we're working through our feasibility study, our team's actually looking at integrating it into the design that they're doing. I would say sometimes maybe not recognizing the gender impacts the positive decisions they're making have. One of those quick examples would be integrating the refuge stations underground. So at first glance, that seems very obvious. You need to have access to bathrooms for the work that's being done underground, but it removes that psychosocial concern of women or men seeing other employees relieving themselves underground. And And also just from like a menstruation health perspective, you're giving women access to something that they need without having them to travel far distances to get that. So, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I would say we're on a similar path. In our business, it's very repetitive. So we run a lot of adding rods, removing rods, pulling tubes, adding rods, removing rods, pulling tubes. So in our business, the focus for us was really heavily on the physical aspects of adding more women into our workplace. And so the evolution of thought towards how does that impact our safety beyond the immediate finger pinches, the things that we associate with traditional safety, has been a change of mind for a lot of our leaders. How do we embrace this idea that there's a different impact that is sometimes not as easy to measure? We're used to measuring safety as the number of guards we can check, the number of pre-ops we've done, the number of events that we've completed or logged. And so it's definitely an evolving area for us. So we're excited to help educate our teams on that idea, because that's honestly the guards, the checks, all the things that we do are kind of neutral. A lot of it, other than the PPE, is not as specific to gender. But for us, it's the interaction with all of those pieces is what is the key part for us that really we haven't finished really deep diving into. So can you provide?
Yeah, and just to echo what Kaitlyn had mentioned, as a corporation, we too have several key goals and behaviors, not only around safety priorities, which are very important to Vale, as well as gender and inclusion conversations and even targets over the past few years that the company has set. When you translate that to a site location, similar, a lot of the focus has been on the physical. We too have revisited refuge stations in the last year or two as well. When we think about women being underground, having feminine hygiene products available. And I think where our growth opportunity really stems from now going forward as we kind of revise our management system is the psychological piece and making sure we're creating a safe environment where anybody can speak up and bring those concerns to the table.
Yeah, and I think our kind of aha moment or, why statement came from our previous president probably about 6 years ago, and he kind of brought it to our attention, and I hadn't really thought about it personally, but he's like, I have 2 young daughters, and I want them to be comfortable in joining the mining industry, and he said, I'm not sure that I would be at this point. And when you hear that from the leader of your company and then start to take action about what you're going to do about it, it changes the mindset, right? And it changes how you think about things. And, this is, our projects look a lot different than they did 10, 15 years ago. But there's still a lot of room to go. But it's important because part of the driver is honestly competition. We want to be the best company that we can be. And if we have a narrow viewpoints and mindsets and don't employ a diverse workforce, then we're not going to be as strong as we can be. So it's a little bit self-serving in a sense there, but ultimately that was kind of our why statement and really got us thinking about what we need to do to improve.
Thank you for that. And it's great to hear that your companies have started the journey and where you are, but I'm sure it hasn't been easy. So just to get into the meat of it, Renee and Steve, could you perhaps share some of the barriers and challenges that your companies have faced along the way?
Yeah, I'll kick off. I think one of our biggest barriers in Vale Base Metals has actually been the age of our mining locations. In most cases, you think of even the Sudbury, Ontario region, over 100 years of mining of experience. But the reality is most likely the site or the change room or different facilities were built before we had a diverse and inclusive workforce. And so now having to go back and spend dollars and retrofit locations and redesign sites that we already have takes leadership commitment. And that's something we have to be very conscientious of as we go through our locations.
Yeah, and I think from our perspective, I see 2 main barriers, and we're working on both of them. But the first one is just the physical aspect of some of the work associated with mine contracting. It can be highly specialized work, and often involve, handling jack legs and stopers, which I tried it, not good at it, and I'm a bigger guy, and just physically from a female's perspective, it's tougher. It's a lot of weight. So we're really looking at how we can take that physical burden out of the hands, and it's safer for everybody. It's not just safer for women; it's safer for everybody. So we've got data on injury frequencies compared to how we put in ground support, right? So that's a big barrier. And the other one that we've seen is, we need as a contractor, I think you need a client who aligns with your values too, right? And if clients have expectations of, we want to see 30% of female representation on your workforce, okay, we need to tackle this right in the proposal side of things, because we know the talent pool, it just isn't the same, right? So we are happy to work with, getting local diverse talent on your project, but it's going to affect the schedule. It's going to affect the cost. So you really need to tackle that at the forefront. And we work at the BHP Jansen site now, and when I walk around those offices, it is different. You mentioned in your presentation, Nancy, the gender equality there. Right? It is just different, but that took time as well. I would suggest we've only been there for about 2.5 years, but it takes time. You got to walk the talk, and you have to plan for it in your project schedules and budgets.
Yeah. Thank you. And all of you have really highlighted some of the, physical challenges and barriers, but so much of what underpins health and safety and the ability to speak up and to have a secure sense of psychological safety, so much of that is underpinned by psychological safety. So Kaitlyn and Ben, could you please share how that's manifested in your organizations?
Sure, yeah. As Nancy highlighted, and if we look at what is a psychologically safe workplace, it's a workplace where employees are comfortable to speak up, ask questions, admit mistakes without fear of replication or punishment. It builds a more engaged workforce. They're usually higher achieving, and a lot of the time that workforce is more diverse. So for Wyloo, when we look at it, it starts with our empowerment value, and that even within the wording of the value highlights the need for a team that believes in themselves and what they're going to do, but that is highly diverse. We need to focus, like, for example, I guess with our HSER site. So recently, as you mentioned, there was reporting that came out that talked about sexual violence or different pressures that women feel in the workplace. And although we had done an assessment of our site from a physical safety standpoint, we had not yet applied that measure to the exploration site. So something we did is we looked at, okay, is there locking mechanisms on all the doors? Do the women in the workplace feel safe? Are they able to come to their supervision and talk about that? Do they have a place they can go 24 hours a day with access to a locked, secure building that's not a tent, access to a phone, access to a radio that they'd be able to contact someone? So much of this is leadership driven, and it's not just a policy or something that you're implementing. It's actually the culture that you're building in the business. Once again, just highlighting that confidence that people have to speak up and raise the different concerns or consequences they feel. I love the dark parking lot analogy of men and women walking through a dark parking lot. There's a sliding scale on how comfortable we are all there. But the consequence of what could happen to a female versus a male could be quite different. And if you don't have those people that feel confident in your workplace to highlight that consequence, to then have a greater risk assessment for it, you're not actually seeing the bigger picture. We're just continuing to speak into that same self-fulfilling prophecy or void.
Oh, do you know? Yeah. I think as an industry, we're pretty good at risk assessments, right? We learned that growing up. Whenever you started in the industry, is how to really look at a task, how to analyze it, and how to come to some solutions. And it's helping our teams learn to shift that great skill set towards unseen but very strongly felt risk. And once our teams start to do that, and it comes with education and training and development, we can really deploy a lot of the tools that we already know to help make us better as an industry. And I think about stop work authority. That's a concept that we're all really familiar with on the safety side, but we need to make sure that that same application happens when we talk about psychosocial risk or uncomfortableness for a task, we're used to that, but an environment, a condition, an existing thing on site. And those improvements are going to help all of us. And we unfortunately have lost some people to suicide over the years. And if these solutions had been in place at the time, it would have benefited the diversity of our workforce, but it also would have benefited the mental health of all of the workforce. So these solutions, all of them, like Steve mentioned, heavy lifting things, as we improve in those, we get better and better as a society, as an industry, not just exclusively benefiting women or any one that's our goal.
Thanks, Ben. And I want to stay with you and add Steve to the conversation because you guys both bring that unique contractor perspective. Can you share, I guess, what are your thoughts on how someone from your side of the business can influence and help shape the partnerships in your working relationships on this issue?
Well, it is harder because as a contractor, we're very appreciative of all the work, no matter where it is, no matter who it's with. And our company right now we're in 16 countries. And as we work with probably 100 clients around the world, we end up seeing some disparity between what company A and company B are doing, and there's a scale. And we love working with companies that are well-equipped and committed to this journey with us. We have had a few that we are the leaders. And when that happens, we like learning from large companies that have great, strong systems because it helps us. And then take some of that information to a smaller company. It's a challenge for us for sure. There's a phrase I saw at the Johannesburg airport one time that said, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And it takes us both working hard to go together and to get further. And we've seen it, unfortunately, where we've hired women into the business, put them through training and introduced them into mining, only to be told that there's no room on site, that there's not a spot that can accommodate women in the current count. And so we've had to really learn to partner early in the process to say, how do we make sure we're not running ahead of you and that we're not being pushed, but we're working together to go far.
Yeah, similar to what Ben's saying, like we are at a huge advantage that we get to observe so many different perspectives. And, if we're doing our job well, we could take the things that we like from, this part of the country and this part of the world and bring it to ourselves. And, we've had some clients, really raise the bar and open our eyes to things. And, and there's some places where we raise the bar for our clients. There's a lot of parallels between DEI and health and safety, right? But I think the more we can collaborate and share best practices, the better. We had a client a while ago when we were designing a work stage in a shaft, and for anybody who's worked in a shaft, the Galloway, you stay there. You're there for the shift, right? And they brought it to our attention. Well, you should have like washroom facilities in your work stage design. And honestly, I don't think I would have ever thought of that, right? So, but now it's something that I remember and I've shared with you now, and it's something that everybody can take with them. So, just more the collaboration, the better, and we'll see some dynamic changes, I think.
Thank you. And kind of building off of that work design, job design, Kaitlyn, I wanted to come to you and ask at what point in the mining life cycle should companies start thinking about this, and how has Wyloo navigated that?
Sure. Yeah, I think the short answer is there's no wrong time. Whatever stage your company is in, where you are in the mining life cycle, it is the right time to take that perspective into account. I think the longer, more pragmatic answer is it can be really hard. Earlier, you're in exploration and development, your resources in the HR and health and safety department as a nonprofit setup for the business is limited. You are challenged by the industry where you are. Wyloo faces this right now with where nickel is, the size of our company, restricted budgets, and we are really focused on choosing things that are the most impactful that we can focus our attention on. So I mentioned the psychosocial aspect before, building the culture at the business. I think at an exploration site, areas you can focus on are having the different types of PPE available to different body types, different genders, You can also focus, I talked about safe accommodation and secure workplaces, things being well lit. You can focus on the psychosocial aspects, so training your frontline supervisors on violence and harassment and really raising the bar for what we want people to execute. We just talked about contractors, so bringing contractors into your site that are going to meet those safe standards and expectations that we have. And that's the way we're really focusing our resources at this time.
Great. And, just like psychological safety, leadership is another, big critical factor in underpinning this issue. Leadership, culture, behaviors, and all of that, all of what that impacts. So, Renee, could you give us a little bit of a window on how Vale has navigated that aspect, given the diversity of your operations?
Yeah, over the last, several years, Vale Global, but also Vale Base Metals has put a high priority on diversity and inclusion and representative workforces based on where we're operating in the world. In Canada itself, in 2019, we were running around 11% women, and at the end of last year, we were at 16%. There is definitely a commitment as we go through and continue to grow as a company and want to become very cost efficient at what we do, and having that representative workforce and that diversity of opinion at the table to help us design and run our locations. And so we continue to hear, and we've heard it throughout this forum this week with our new CEO, Sean Usmar, to say this will continue to be a priority for us, and we aren't going to waver off of that standpoint.
Great, thank you. And Steve, you had shared early on when I asked a question about the challenges in this area, but perhaps could you share some successes that you guys have experienced?
Yeah, I think the industry's come a long way. And I think sometimes we don't celebrate the successes quite well enough. But internally, we recently launched a Women in Mining mentorship program, just as an internal program. And the sponsorship group, when putting this together, we were very wondering, is this going to get any traction? How's this going to work? And the response from, one, the females within our workforce who were signing up and wanted to participate was great. And two, from leadership personnel, male and female, who wanted to help out and wanted to grow the people within our company. It's been a smashing success so far. And we've got very, very senior people like board members and executives talking with some of our female workforces, on a monthly basis and going through programs. And I think the key message here is we want to be allies to our diverse workers, because I don't have their experiences, right? But now, sitting down and talking with them and learning from them, it's going to change our perspective on things, and we're going to just keep considering things that we hadn't considered before. So, there's a lot of great things that will happen. We gotta pat ourselves on the back from time to time too. So, that.
Great. And Ben and Renee, I want to come to you guys because, what we're really talking about is inclusive work practices, broader DEI issues, and it's been proven over and over again by various studies, by even market performance of companies that invest in this, that, this is just good business. But, and I'm going to go there, with the geopolitics of today, and, I'm particularly interested in companies like yours that do a lot of business with the U.S. How does that complicate your journey? Will you have to change your approach at all?
I know for us. So I live in the U.S. and I wasn't hoping that we would talk about this. So for us, the mining industry is a very traditional business, right? For many of you, you will have operations where you have been able to make significant progress. And for our teams, there's still a very long road ahead. So our teams are often working 2 at a time, out with a geologist out on a mountainside for 12 hours on their own. So it's we're kind of the tip of the spear sometimes when we are out doing these jobs. And what we found is when discussions first started occurring, it was a lot based around, well, we need to do this because it's not fair, right? We need to have more diversity because it's not the right balance. It's not the right number. And the backlash you're seeing right now in the US, I think, is largely directed towards people who say, we have set specific targets, we're going to go towards that. And they say, well, you can't do that because that's not fair to Steve or Bob or whoever, right? But what we've tried to do is say, for us, it's not a target. It's not a specific goal to say we're going to make sure it's fair for everybody in life. We want to make sure that all of our people have opportunity. And we believe very strongly that we perform better and that we do a lot better as a team when we are diverse. So what we try to do is communicate to all of our members, around the company, that, listen, we're going to be a better company because we have a lot stronger, diverse group that brings new, unique perspectives. And so for us, we've tried to stay out of the political fray. We don't care who's popular, who's not popular. And we try to say, our goal is to make sure that we provide a great environment for everybody. And that has to include a diverse workforce, because guess what? We're not exactly the most desirable industry for the world, right? Most people that are out working on those 12-hour shifts, if they could, they wouldn't be out on the middle of a mountainside. Some of them love it. Some of them are doing it because they want to be able to feed their family. And for us, that's the key thing that we try to focus on is, I live next to a Amazon facility where they do a lot of shipping. And we have great people who have immigrated to the U.S. or whatever country in the U.S. in my case, who are willing to go and sling boxes around to Amazon for lower pay and less benefits than I'm willing to give them to come out and work on our jobs. So I think sometimes they just don't know that. And so for us, it's not because we believe exclusively in some grand social goal. That's a side effect in our mind of doing the right thing for the right reason, and then those things take care of themselves. So we're choosing to say we're not going to be in the fight. We're trying to just continually make progress every day because we believe we need to do that as an industry.
Yeah, I think to echo that, obviously with the news that has gone on in the last 24 hours, this will definitely be impacting Vale Base Metals and many companies, mining companies across Canada and the United States. But I think at the end of the day, the average mining location, right, is not in a lovely community like Toronto. It's in a small mining town somewhere in a remote location. And we need to continue to be focused on having a representative workforce that looks like that community, to bring those people in, whether it's women, Indigenous, minorities, to be an active part of the operation. And we want to be a proud owner and operator, where we live and work. And that's really essential to being a success in the mining industry, regardless of where that sits in the world. From a personal level, it's going to be an interesting ride here coming up. And I think this is where we kind of have to stay true to our core beliefs.
Yep. Absolutely. And so Kaitlyn and Steve, I want to come to you both. How confident are you that the mining industry will make meaningful strides in this area? And what will be the biggest barrier as an industry for us to create a more inclusive workplace and health and safety in the workplace, starting with gender?
Sure, yeah. I think I'm very confident we can continue to make meaningful strides, even though the data that's out there is showing that we have a long way to go. There is some concern I have around the geopolitical situation, but that aside, I think you guys addressed that nicely. We have a long way to go, but I think our biggest barrier is actually just on our attraction and recruiting people into the workforce in the mining industry. So not just women, but continuing to bring in those underrepresented groups to diversify everything and build out, from a health and safety perspective, many different viewpoints and address the many different concerns in the workplace. I know just as a woman in the industry, I've been here for 15 years, and I see how different things are. And I see personally the improvements, whether it's at PDAC, out at site, different ways in which we're operating, the questions in which all genders and different people in the workplace are asking now. People are starting to see things more forced or more well-rounded. My big concern is we still have a reputation, and we know we have a skills shortage that's coming, and we are not attractive to the younger workforce that's fresh out of school and coming in. We need to continue to fight to tell the success stories that we do have and continue to be a great employer.
Yeah, I'm confident because sometimes necessity drives change. I think about the mines that are deeper and deeper, and you have to adapt. You have to still be efficient. And I think our industry will, if it wants to survive and thrive, or the companies within it, they're going to have to think outside the box and keep on this trend of getting a more diverse workforce with different skill sets. And I think as a lot of more work becomes, there's hundreds of different roles in the mining industry. And I think the common person in downtown Toronto has no idea of that, right? But as the roles evolve and you get more tele-remote work, and you can open up your windows of recruit widely. You can have people in this room next door operating haul trucks in Northern Ontario, right? Like, so why couldn't I employ more females, right? Like, there's that barrier is getting knocked down. But, change is tough. I was joking, there's two things that miners hate is the way things are and change. But, sometimes you gotta, business will help drive this and necessity, right? So, and if you don't adapt, you're probably going to get left behind.
So I'm gonna go to the last question. I know I could keep asking lots, but I want to give an opportunity for the audience. And Steve, I'm going to come back to you, and then anyone else, if you'd like to add as well, please go ahead. But Steve, I'm going to reflect back to you the question that you shared about the story of your former president of your company. And Steve, would you let your mom, sister, daughter, female partner work in the industry? And how does this issue really resonate for you personally?
Yeah, I think this goes back to some of the changes, because honestly, 18 years ago, I probably wouldn't have wanted my sister working on some of the mine sites and some of the things that I saw. And it ties into leadership so much, right? Like, if you can have all the posters on the wall and everything like that and all the training, but if you don't have that person on site who drives that bus and doesn't tolerate some of the stuff that shouldn't be tolerated, then you could do well. So to me, it depends on who that person's going to work for. Like that's a major factor. But I think we've made great strides, and I can correlate it back to safety. Newmont had a slogan, safe enough for our families, right? And I think you could flow that into diversity, inclusion, safety, whatever, right? Like, yeah, do you want it? And yes, and I've got two young kids. They're both boys, but I love the mining industry, and I think if we do a little bit more of a better job of publicizing so many of the benefits, then we can help make some strides there.
Great. And did anyone else want to add anything to that question?
Sure. I would say yes. I agree with your sentiment, though it would depend on the employer. But as someone who's a woman, and then also my role is to bring people into the industry, I really want to feel confident, and I do feel confident with my current employer and some other employers that we've had conversations with, that it is a safe place for women to work.
Great. Well, thank you. That concludes the panel discussion, but now we're going to open it up to all of you. And we do have a question mic up here in the room, so please feel free to walk up, ask your questions, and also please remember we still have Nancy with us as well. So, she's available to answer any additional questions you may have.
Hi, hello. Thank you for being here today. My name is Anila. I'm a GIT geologist in training. And from my experience, I personally feel like women at entry levels, we're very prone and susceptible to harassment and bullying. And from a management perspective, with your expertise, what advice would you have to women in entry position, such as in the room, for this summer field season? How to take space and how to stand your ground when you're the only female in a core shack or you another female in the field?
I would say to start, remember you take up space too. And your voice is valid and you're bringing a different perspective to the group. Be confident.
Yeah, I would probably go a step further, is to say, when you enter the mining industry or any industry, when something does come your way that makes you feel uncomfortable, do you have a support group to go to kind of vet that and say, is this a normal feeling? Is this the right reaction? But also to do some research and know what your company's HR policies are.
Yeah.
You have to be well educated yourself to know that, okay, if I'm going to take the next step, here's what I need to do to address that. And in a lot of cases, at least from my own experience, I don't feel, coming from a STEM education, that we train ourselves great on technology, but we don't train ourselves well to ready ourselves for the workforce we're about to face. And unfortunately, you have to do some education on your own to be prepared for that.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say, we almost look at this as what's your obligation? But it's a bit of the same shift that we have had towards violence against women overall when we say, well, maybe she shouldn't address that. Maybe we need to shift the conversation around and know that it's not only a opportunity to report inappropriate behavior, but that becomes a key part of helping us get better. And the fact that you're having to report that behavior, that's not your fault, right? If there's something inappropriate going on, that's in no way you being a whistleblower, you being a part of a chain to break a problem. We have to have you involved in that conversation, because as good as we get, there's always an outlier. And our goal as HR in mining companies is to find those outliers and get them out of our company. Mm. And so you're helping us to become better if you are willing to share that kind of information. So I would say don't look at it as a negative. Look at it as you're helping to build the kind of company that you want to be working at long term. We want.
Yeah, and I would say, like, your question, it hurt me a little bit. I guess, like, it's just like, and like, damn, like, it sucks that we have, young people coming into the industry with those types of concerns. And but it's an absolute reality. And I've had conversations with, when we hired a young female employee, I hired her, she was a student, and I had, this was about probably 6-7 years ago, but I had a talk with her about, if you come to me, you come to me. And I wish I didn't have to have that conversation. And honestly, 7 years later, I don't think I would have the same conversation with the same tone. But find a champion, find somebody who you trust and to partner up with, I think. And that really goes a long way. Find that leader. And a leader isn't based on job title. A leader is based on what they do and what they say and how they act consistently. So I agree with everybody, but that's kind of my take as well.
Yep. Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Shannon. First-time caller, long-time listener. I have had the privilege of being in the mining industry, and one of the challenges I had was I would get to speak with frontline workers, and they would say things like, you're just hiring women and minorities, and you're not taking the rest of us. And so good, hardworking people can't get jobs. And I would use all the HR good stats to be like, well, actually, we hired 1,200 men, and actually it was only 200 women because not enough had that exposure, or maybe they weren't inspired enough to see themselves in those roles. I would love to hear your words of how to approach people like that come to you with that kind of response of like, how do you know, like, you're not really thinking about us, and it's when they realize, but it is about talent, right? It's not just about a box you fit into, because we shouldn't have boxes, but we do. And so any words that you've used to arm yourself to deal and come back with an interesting response that may have led to changing the discussion and changing their behavior, I'd love to hear that.
I've heard similar stuff to that before, and I've turned it around on the person, said like, were you born with a jackleg in your hand? It's like, you're like, I see, you gotta challenge some of these some of this mindset a little bit, right? Because everybody gets a start somehow. Everybody needs a chance, an opportunity to prove themselves. So sometimes with those, I kind of go on the offensive, I'll say, and try and turn it around on them a little bit, just to say, like, the perspective is short-sighted, and the data, and there's various approaches on quotas and various management forms. Some of the, I've heard a female CEO say, that's not a good idea, and she has a good reason for that, I'm sure. So, my perspective would just be to try to not individualize it and think about certain people, but say, and you can say, this is better for our business, right? And honestly, I think probably most organizations see talent shortfalls right now. So why can't we look and make ourselves better? And if you have better, stronger coworkers, you're going to end up making more money. And that's generally what the people are in it for.
Just to echo sort of an equal or a similar sentiment of turning the question back on them, can you tell me a way in which this has personally impacted you? Because a lot of the time it's that bigger sentiment around it, but really when it comes down with it and having that conversation, there is no impact on them. And sometimes that's enough to diffuse the situation and completely remove the conversation. And I think also focusing on equality doesn't necessarily mean equal support for everyone. We know certain groups have a higher leg up in just life in general. And I think providing extra support to different underrepresented groups doesn't necessarily take away from anything that person might be feeling.
Yes. Well, I think with our team, especially those that have that attitude, we have to make sure in our messaging, it's not just blind targets, because that team that says that gets really mad when you say, oh, we want to have, we're going to hire 200 women this year. And they don't pause to think, and we're also going to hire 1,200 men, like from your example, right? We want to make sure that we're saying we are going to hire 1,400 great people. And those 1,400, we are hoping we can get more participation from women, because women honestly tend to do a better job. They tend to not beat up the equipment that we own, all this kind of stuff. So we want to make sure that there's the business necessity is explained as well. And then I think you had mentioned it about the idea of we want to make our company look like the community that we operate in. And all we have to do is look around and say, hey, this isn't 1930, right? It's not, most of us don't have somebody staying at home in bare feet and all the stereotypes of 100 years ago, and where we can help drive that point home that life has evolved, right? We're not still using pickaxes. We're using drills that are hydraulic instead of that. So we got to evolve in all of our thought processes.
Hi, Renee.
Hi. No, and I think to echo what Nancy had mentioned earlier too in her talk, preparing the workforce for an incoming workforce for the change is half the battle too. It's one thing to go out and hire a bunch of people, but it's another to help alleviate the change aspect and the anxiety around that with your current workforce if you don't do some education. There in my mind, I read in a leadership book once, right? There's no such thing as over communication when it comes to change, and everyone's going to respond differently. So finding the right message that really tweaks or engages different crews or different areas on your site is key when you prepare for something like that.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Can I get a quick smile for social media?
Thank you.
We should smiling the whole time.
Yeah, that's smile.
I'm a second-year civil engineer, and my question is actually for the earlier discussion on safety hazards. And I'm coming from the perspective of someone who has, like, a mother and sisters and uncles in that mining industry. You mentioned something about how the safety hazards are mostly like women, the women specific, the reproductive hazards. And I just wanted a bit of clearance about that. Is it that there's no anything in place to prevent this, or I just wanted to ask about that.
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you. And great questions so far. And I applaud your bravery in asking these. With regards to reproductive hazards, there is a reality that they do exist in the workplace. And there is a lack of research to support setting regulated or prescribed standards in regulation that can apply to both men and women, because reproductive hazards apply for both. But in this case, we're talking about women. In addition to that, where we don't see regulated standards, we often look to guidance. And there's a real void around guidance as well. So I referenced the Laurentian University CROSH Guide to Healthy Pregnancies. There's another one, another resource that we used, and I'm happy to send my slides if you'd like, because there's more details in there, provided by NIOSH, and it talks about pregnancy in your work. I will say, though, that US NIOSH, a lot of their site information has been taken down. So I went to look for it in preparation, and I couldn't find it. But I do have a copy if you are interested. But it's lacking research, lacking standards. So what we've had to do as occupational hygienists is look to work that's being done behind the scenes, digging into that, making professional judgments. So those 8 are the 8 that we've identified within our work.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
You might as well keep the mic, Nancy. I'll have a follow-up. Melissa Ning, I'm on the board for Women in Mine Canada. I'm also the chief geologist for Chemical Corporation's McArthur River, which is an underground mine site. So to kind of follow up, I was an underground pregnant worker. This was over 12 years ago. So exposed to some of those things like ionizing radiation. But that's not the reason why I stopped working underground while I was pregnant. It was things like the vibration, like the diesel particulate, like if we have underground emergencies, some of the extra toxins that might be in the air for that. So back then when I was doing research, trying to find the research, a little discouraged there wasn't, but discouraged now that, this is 12 years and there's still no research. So how can we as individuals in this room push for more research?
Yeah, so I'll speak to follow-up as well as partnerships. So this message has been delivered at CIM a couple times last year in Vancouver and then in Toronto in the fall, and then it was delivered at a global gathering in Ireland. And companies came to myself and my colleague Courtney Gendron that I mentioned afterwards and said, we want to do something about this. So it's going back to our risk-based approach that we've talked about and identifying what are the hazards that people are potentially exposed to and actually developing a program, working with, the technical expertise that, can be provided, and then integrating that program into your management system. So that's a starting place. And actually, I did leave out one reference to a Canadian resource, BC Mines. They actually have gone through their legislation where you see occupational exposure limits, and they've taken ACGIH documentation. This is an association in the US that sets standards, and they've added an R notation beside it to indicate that these are potential reproductive hazards as well. Also a very good resource. But partnerships. So mining, my position is mining as a sector has resources to support their workers, right? So let's partner, similar to what Vale, I reference that one all the time, their partnership with Laurentian University to do this study on mining mental health was over 4 or 5 years, 2,200, participants, really strong data set, very, very good piece of work. And so that can happen with other occupational hazards and should. So I think we need to drive the sector more to enter in.
Thank you. I do have another question for a couple of the panelists as well, Steve and Ben, specifically because you guys are in a unique situation. You're contractors, right? You're coming onto other people's mine sites. I know you don't want to refuse work. You're not going to at this point. Do you ever see in the evolution of your companies getting to a point where you're seeing the facilities, you see your workforce, and you're saying, no, you don't have bathroom facilities that are within walking distance. You don't have a camp that has doors that can be locked. Kaitlyn was saying earlier about the whole locking of the doors situation. Whenever I go to a site, I ask the same question to the group, and I'm like, do you lock your doors at night? And all the men are like, no, why would I do that? That's just extra work. Every single woman, when you ask that question, all the females lock their doors at night. So are you ever going to get to this point where you're going to be this driving force? And I think you guys have that opportunity eventually to be like, no, it's not safe for our workers, so therefore we're not accepting this.
That's an excellent question. And actually, we did a recently in a project in Mexico, like a security risk threat assessment, right? And I hadn't really considered some of that for in Canada. And again, I'm learning today just as much as everybody else. So I think we'll try and influence, right? Like, it's probably not going to be my call as to whether we say work or not, but we've had some good examples of influence. I haven't thought too much about the locked door stuff at camp, to be honest with you, but I'm going to now, so thank you. But specifically on dry space, we've just put it into our proposal, put it into our bids. And this, a client might say, why do you need 15 female dry spots and bringing in trailers, and there's cost to that. And we've had the conversation. Well, the client might say, well, we're not paying for that. And we'll say, fine. It might come out of our profit line or whatever, but that's important because I've seen massive changes in dry situation. I worked on a project in 2010 where the women had to drag their gear from their room to the area, right? To the general lineup area and stuff. And like, it was wrong. But again, we've come a long way, and it's a big part of mine planning now. I remember somebody from Vale last year in April, like they were talking about gender neutral drives, and I hadn't considered that, right? So a lot of progress, but sometimes you got to stand up for what you believe in, for sure.
Yeah, and I would say that how we get things done is to codify it, right? Put it into a standard that says every door shall lock, every da-da-da-da-da. And then once we have that done, it makes it auditable, it makes it trackable, and we can include it in our bids, we can include it in the processes. But it is, I agree with Steve, things like having a good discussion around it help us determine what should be included in that standard. Because typically our standards are written through failure, right? We've had a problem, we've had this thing happen. And so if we can figure out how to proactively write some of those things in, and unfortunately, the fact that almost everyone in here nods, it's not proactive, right? But it's something that we've got to do a better job of writing into what I deem to be our code, right? Into our minimums and our non-negotiables. And those kind of things are easy. Occasionally we'll have a client that's just really out there as far as what they have in the camp. It's just not acceptable. Most are really good and willing to work and to help promote the right things if they're aware of it, if it's brought to their attention. So I'm confident that we can change as an industry. It'll just take some time.
Thank you very much. Really good discussion so far. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Cameron. I am also a member of Women in Mining Canada, and thank you everyone for this great discussion. Listening to the feedback that we've been given throughout the session, I've noticed a couple of themes that have been emerging, and a lot of it has to do with, the use of the word journey. We're on a journey. This takes time. There's pathways forward that we need to follow. So it does sound as if, we're thinking longer term, that everything needs to be happening. It's slow to change. We're continuously building forward. However, we also heard from a young lady who is thinking ahead to summer drilling season, and there's women on mine sites today. And I don't know a single mining company that would say that safety, that wouldn't say that safety is their number one priority, that's an imperative. So my question to everyone is,
So I don't know how much of that everyone heard. Just to start over, I mean, it's really just about the sense of urgency in terms of making our systems, our strategies around safety, fit with women in order to keep them, to increase their representation in the industry, and a lot of it has to be cultural, and cultural takes time. But at the same time, there are women working today that we also need to be respecting and thinking about. So how do you balance that? How do you think about that in the programs and work that you're developing?
Yeah, if I could, yeah. So thanks for tying this back because, and I'm glad you're coming to the mic again. This other person. That first question, very powerful question. And my response is, we need to help you with a strategy and a plan so that you feel included. And inclusion is important to your well-being. And so, like the group said here, look for your allies. Who do you report to? Like, if it's a educational practicum, do you have a connection at the educational institution that you're at that you can make aware of your concerns, as well as the workplace, and you can put a strategy together so that when you don't feel comfortable, because I always think we should follow our gut. It's usually right. That, you have a place to go. And it's important to your inclusion, and it's important to the mining sector that we keep you in mining. The other thing I will say, that's a sense of urgency, and thank you for that question and the way you've phrased it. I think every one of us can go from this room with the sense of caring. We know that the sense of caring is a commitment that helps us to excel in health and safety. So if we really examine ourselves and we care about this issue, about diversity and inclusion, and about supporting women in mining, we will have a tremendous impact leaving this room.
Hi, I have a follow-up question. I sat down and I was pondering on your...
Hi, everyone. I'm Natalie Solis. I've been a consulting geotech engineer for my whole career, so 13 years now. And maybe not so much a question, but just a comment and maybe some words of encouragement of the importance of the cultural shift. I think from the ground up, I've been the geotech with two drillers on the mountainside. I've been directing teams of all male contractors on sites many times before, and I've not had many negative or significant negative experiences, and it's because, I don't want to say it's because I've been lucky, but it probably is partially that I've been teamed up with crews of guys that have been respectful to me, and it's gone both ways. But I think it speaks to the culture of the teams that I've been fortunate to work with. But it's critical. I've had to ask for help because I can't sling call boxes around, right? Like, I can if the path is perfectly clear and I can pick it up and it's at the right level. But then I ask my drill helper, hey, can you help me move these out? And he can pick 3 up and just walk out the door. So yeah, just a comment, I hear what you're saying. It's not all bad. And I think the shift is happening. I've seen it over the last, 13 years in my career. So while it's a work in progress, I've personally seen some of the progress, and just wanted to bring that perspective to the table.
Thanks. Yeah, just to comment on your comment, I heard a wonderful quote last week in Denver from Melissa Harmon, she's a mining executive involved in women in mining in the U.S. and she won an award last week in Denver. And she asked herself 2 questions for any job: could I do that job? Talking about the physical nature, and then would I do that job? Talking about, is this somewhere I want to work, right? And honestly, I heard those 2 very simple questions last week, and it's already triggered thoughts in my brain. Like, that's simple, and what we need to think about when we talk about building a psychologically safe workplace, right? And workplace, rather.
Yep, absolutely.
Hi, my name is Mario. A director of a company called Minewell, and we provide, actually, going on the topic of Steve. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Mario.
talking about the physical side of jobs, and we actually do all the ergonomics and physical therapy on site, specifically for mining industry. So a lot of data that comes forward from these specific jobs, and what we're noticing is that it really comes down to the supervisors, captains, and upper management to be open to the idea of women being more involved in mine ops. Like, there's a lot of women when you go to surface. I'm talking about an underground mine. There's a lot of women in surface and geology, and it could be possibly, in engineering offices. And we do see that's growing. But when it comes down to the mine operations, and if you're in an underground mine, you're very limited to what you can do. So one of the initiatives that we've been working on lately is how do we make those job roles more ergonomically friendly for women? And how do, like you just mentioned, this lady just mentioned the core shack, lifting those boxes, like, the PDA, the physical demand analysis, should be very detailed to a woman versus like a man that's actually been 30 years of experience or a newcomer. So it's about updating those things. But really what we see is upper management leads that way. And it shouldn't be tolerated when there's discrimination against the physical aspect of the job. You need to be able to cater to certain job roles. So that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Yeah, honestly, our job is a whole bunch of handling rods. So here's how we can do it. We had an ergonomist come to our site, do an assessment, measure everything, grip strength. We realized we had 105 PSI grip strength. That's what was required to grip a drilling rod and be able to carry it, move it around. And that was done in 2008, something like that. And there's all sorts of studies. Liberty Mutual has material handling tables. And that table shows that grip strength eliminates 99% of women from generally achieving that, right? So we felt all good. Okay, we've done it. We've assessed it. We've done it all the right way. And then we have a policy in place as the company shifts, as rod handling becomes more common, as all of these things evolve, as we had a second driller assistant, now all of a sudden we can have someone else helping to do that, right? So to support your idea, we have to evolve our policies and our processes despite the heavy loads, despite the kind of environment that we're in. And we have to make sure that we don't have that disparate impact of a policy basically eliminating everybody from consideration. So that's a journey that we had to go through, and it faced some opposition, because of the perception, you're just making it easier for the women, right? That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to make sure we have enough people to crew all of our drills. And guess what? That one day that they measured the 105 PSI, it might have been with the rod this size, and we don't use that rod size anymore. So making sure that we keep up to date with policies and practices is important.
Hi, my name's Candace. I work for DRA Global. I'm in HR. I've been in the mining industry for a number of years. I've worked for a mining company, and now DRA is a project management engineering firm. So I've kind of see it from both sides. But one thing I will say, I think in HR, we don't always see what's happening at site. So from a corporate scheme of things, usually we don't have oversight into that. So for you, I had a couple of ideas, and I don't know what's happening at mine sites, but just a thought. I would assume most companies shouldn't send just one woman to a site with predominantly men. I would think that it should be kind of some buddy system. There's always safety in numbers. I think most women know this. So I would hope that companies take that into account and aren't just throwing women into a situation where they're the only ones in the space. Also, I think I heard this really interesting thing that was going on at one of the sites we worked at. And the safety people had put different personalized things, family members and things like that, on their safety vests. Sometimes I think adding a personal element to things like that changes how people see another person. So maybe you have daughters, seeing that you have family members, and sometimes I think people act differently when they're representing not just themselves, but also their family members. So I don't know, it's just a few thoughts in that particular case. One of the things I would say for myself, I've never been interested in working on a site because of the rotational cycle. I also have children myself, so for me, that does not seem appealing. However, I think that mining companies could potentially change the way they look at that, maybe shorten up cycles, have overlapping so that there's more opportunity for women to see their families more often. But also, I think from a social, psychological sense of things, I think that could be beneficial not only to women, but also to men, because I think if you're taking time away from your family, then, and you're in an isolated place, that sometimes that can affect people. So seeing family more often, I think the mining industry in general just kind of needs to take that into account. But just curious, what does the rotational cycle look like where you guys work?
Yeah, so work-life balance is a big factor, and I've seen a big shift too. The ratio used to always be 2 to 1. 2 days at work per 1 day off. Like 4 weeks on, 2 weeks off was probably the most common. And if you go back historically, 8 and 4, 6 and 3. And everybody now wants 2 and 2. They want that 50-50 split. Yeah. It's a pretty good balance, I find. I shouldn't say everybody, but that's a big consensus. That you can make enough money and have good time off. And you got to remember, like Renee was saying, like a lot of these jobs, there's a lot of travel too, right? So you're burning days off each way. When you're getting there. So, but yeah, that work-life balance is a big piece for everyone, right? It's a big driver.
Yeah, at least our fly-in, fly-out operation here in Canada is a 2-week on, 2-week off fly-in, fly-out situation. Yeah, our remote site is the same.
And sorry, just curious, because I don't know enough about your industries, or sorry, not your industries, but your particular employer. But do you always have another person sort of kind of in between those cycles so that there's always sort of overflow between when people are coming in and when they're leaving?
I mean, I can speak to our exploration site. So we're very small. The teams are max roughly of 15 people per rotation. And we do have one site supervisor or a cross shift of site supervisors that do cross those 2 shifts. So they'd have 1 week with one week with the other, so that we keep that consistency.
Yeah. Okay. So I would say from my perspective, had I understood what those rotations look like, maybe the job might be a little bit more appealing as a mother myself. Anyways,
I want to circle back to young lady. I just want you to remember, even to have the confidence at your age to stand up in this forum and bring those concerns forward to a group of industry people, you're already a change maker. So don't stop at raising it here. Don't stop raising it at one level of supervision at site. Keep pushing it forward, because ultimately there's many, many other women who are not going to have the confidence at your age that are new to that site and that industry or that company to come forward. And they're going to be working in a space that they don't feel safe. So I want to just take a minute to congratulate you and say, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your bravery for asking the questions. I encourage all of us to continue to ask the questions. And I really want to extend heartfelt gratitude to Nancy, Steve, Renee, Ben, and Kaitlyn for sharing your stories, helping to educate, increase the awareness on this issue. And hopefully all of us can take some actions that we can bring back to our companies and make sense for us in our context. So thank you so much.
Thank you.